The chapters in your life are written by what you hear and experience. Chapter.com gives you access to amazing audiobooks anytime you want on any connected device, always for free. What's your next chapter? Find it at Chapter.com and make sure to like us on Facebook.
Part 1. The Search Begins. Decisions without actions are worthless. Failure can be good for you. Don't let mental walls block you in. Direct your thoughts, control your emotions, ordain your destiny. A young boy begins the search. I was 6 years old and scared. Selling newspapers on Chicago's tough South Side wasn't easy, especially with the older kids taking over the busy corners, yelling louder, and threatening me with clenched fists. The memory of those dim days is still with me, for it's the first time I can recall turning a disadvantage into an advantage. It's a simple story, unimportant now, and yet it was a beginning. Hal's restaurant was near the corner where I tried to work, and it gave me an idea. It was a busy and prosperous place that presented a frightening aspect to a child of 6. I was nervous, but I walked in hurriedly and made a lucky sale at the first table. Then diners at the second and third tables bought papers. When I started for the fourth, however, Mr. Hal pushed me out the front door. But I had sold 3 papers, so when Mr. Hal wasn't looking, I walked back in and called at the fourth table. Apparently, the jovial customer liked my gumption. He paid for the paper and gave me an extra dime before Mr. Hal pushed me out once again. But I had already sold 4 papers and got a bonus dime besides. I walked into the restaurant and started selling again. There was a lot of laughter. The customers were enjoying the show. One whispered loudly, "Let him be," as Mr. Hal came toward me. About 5 minutes later, I sold all my papers. The next evening, I went back. Mr. Hal again ushered me out the front door. But when I walked right back in, he threw his hands in the air and exclaimed, "What's the use?" Later, we became great friends, and I never had trouble selling papers there again. Years later, I used to think of that little boy, almost as if he were not me but some strange friend from long ago. Once, after I had made my fortune and was head of a large insurance empire, I analyzed that boy's actions in the light of what I had learned. This is what I concluded. 1. He needed the money. The newspapers would be worthless to him if they weren't sold. He couldn't even read them. The few pennies he had borrowed to buy them would also be lost. To a 6-year-old, this catastrophe was enough to motivate him, to make him keep trying. Thus, he had the necessary inspiration to action. 2. After his first success in selling 3 papers in the restaurant, he went back in, even though he knew he might be embarrassed and thrown out again. After 3 trips in and out, he had the necessary technique for selling papers in restaurants. Thus, he gained the know-how. 3. He knew what to say, because he had heard the older kids yelling out the headlines. All he had to do when he approached a prospective customer was to repeat in a softer voice what he had heard. Thus, he possessed the requisite activity knowledge. I smiled as I realized that my little friend had become successful as a newsboy by using the same techniques that later flowered into a system for success that enabled him and others to amass fortunes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, just remember those 3 phrases: inspiration to action, know-how, and activity knowledge. They are the keys to the system. The boy's search goes on. Even though I was raised in a poor, run-down neighborhood, I was happy. Aren't all children happy, regardless of poverty, if they have a place to sleep, something to eat, and room to play? I lived with my mother in the house of relatives. As I grew older, the grandfather of a girl who lived on the top floor of our apartment building sparked my imagination with stories of cowboys and Indians while we ate puffed rice and milk. And each day, when he tired of his storytelling, I would go downstairs in the backyard and live the part of Buffalo Bill or a great Indian warrior chief. My pony, made out of a stick or old broom, was the fastest in the West. Picture a working mother seeing her young son in bed at night and asking him to tell about his day's experiences, those that were good and those that were bad. Picture him, after they had talked for a while, getting out of bed and kneeling beside his mother while she prayed for guidance. Then you will have the feeling of the beginning of my search for the true riches of life. Mother had a lot to pray for. Like all good mothers, she felt that her son was a good boy, but she was concerned because he was keeping bad company. And she was particularly disturbed that he had developed the habit of smoking cigarettes. Tobacco was costly, so I used to roll coffee grounds in cigarette paper when tobacco was not available. Perhaps it made me feel important. For another boy and I smoked only when other boys and girls were around, taking particular pleasure if they seemed shocked. When we had company at home, I would demonstrate how grown up I was by smoking a homemade cigarette. A pattern was being established, but it wasn't.
Listening to great authors can influence how you experience the world around you. Chapter puts amazing audiobooks from the greatest authors at your fingertips, anytime and always for free. What's your next chapter? Find it on Chapter, and please give us your feedback and opinions as we grow our services.